A lot of gamers associate horror with Halloween, but horror is a fantastic genre any time of the year. Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on GameRank's 13 new horror games to play in 2019. Number 13 is Daymare 1998, a third-person survival horror game with the intent of recreating the mood of certain titles from the 1990s. Obviously, you can figure out exactly what they're going for when you hear the words missing deadly virus. But the game's going to give you 3 different characters to play as, and despite the actual overall theme probably being very similar to something we've seen before, promises a fresh storyline as well. Now, the graphics, in my opinion, very interesting. This game was in development before the Resident Evil 2 remake was announced, so it's interesting to see that it actually, to me, looks a very large amount like the Resident Evil 2 remake. Also, that was the series I was alluding to as far as the 1990s. I'm sure it's also the series they're alluding to. The story actually sounds somewhat interesting to me. You start off trying to find the virus, and then bloodthirsty, mutilated monsters appear. To me, it sounds good. In their press materials, they talk a lot about inventory management and lore items, which to me sounds very good. There's also an element of environmental puzzles. Now, given they're going for a 90s kind of look and feel, even though the graphics are obviously a lot better than the 90s, I still have to say I hope environmental puzzles means more than just like key cards and stuff, because I think that if this actually plays out like it could, seems like a pretty awesome, honestly enjoyable, maybe really downright frightening game if it plays out how it should. Daymare 1998 comes to us from Invader Studios to the PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4 sometime Q2 of this year. Number 12 is The Sinking City, which is a game based on the Lovecraft catalog. Now, what's interesting to note is this was originally going to be the Call of Cthulhu game. Frogwares was the original developer of Call of Cthulhu, and although it really hasn't been extensively covered, something transpired that caused a split between the relationship between the publisher, Focus Home Interactive, and Frogware. Now, Frogwares thought, we like what we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it. So they instead dropped the whole license thing and said they're making something that's inspired by Lovecraft. Meaning there are elements that probably aren't exactly Lovecraft, which is fine. I'd like a dash of originality there. Not that Call of Cthulhu was bad. It certainly could have been better, but bad? No. That being said, The Sinking City is more of an open world game, and in all honesty, a lot of that to me looks more interesting than the Call of Cthulhu game, which was very linear. Not that linear is automatically bad, but the approach didn't really work for the story being told. I think this could honestly work out a lot better. Maybe. That depends on the execution, of course. I'm very excited for it. The trailers for this have been really good, and I'll be playing it when it hits Windows, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One on March 21st. Number 11 is Unholy, a game coming much later in the year, but still worth your attention. You play as a woman named Saida, a mother in search of her abducted child. Now, that sounds pretty normal, albeit a bit sad, but it's also taking place in the last city on a dying planet, and it looks like it. The graphics are very good, and they illustrate a very bleak world, and apparently this world is ruled by a regime where your whole life is determined by which social caste you belong to, which sounds not that much different than real life, but whatever. Maybe it's meant to be the future. Maybe not. Who knows? We'll see. It is a first-person horror/stealth game, and to me that sounds very interesting given the environment. Honestly, it's a very weird-looking game, and that's something I like. It's coming late in the year, probably December, and as of right now, it looks like it's only coming to PC, but we don't know. It may end up elsewhere. It certainly looks interesting. I think it gets a little unfairly compared to Agony. I don't really see it, but we'll see. Number 10 is The Peterson Case, a game that I think is probably going to come out very clever. It's a psychological horror game that happens after the Roswell incident. A family by the name of Peterson, of course, disappeared, and you're investigating it. This places you inside various areas. First, obviously, a mansion from the footage that is seen, that's the most clear one, but you also navigate a series of flashbacks and end up seeing a lot of things that are outside of this mansion. What's interesting is the investigative element of it allows you to more or less build scenarios in which you play through of what may have happened to the family. They're referred to as memories in the press materials, but obviously they're speculative memories, and that sounds very interesting. Now, there is not a massive amount of information on the Peterson case as of yet. It is very intriguing from what we've seen, and it is coming to PC, PS4, Xbox One on March 31st. Number 9 is The Beast Inside, a game about a CIA code cracker who moves to the country in order to have a peaceful, quiet attempt at breaking a military code which everyone believes could fix the Cold War problem. Which was a big problem, but the house that he occupies, he finds a diary in which opening that opens up a big old bag of worms. And what he ends up having to deal with is a 100-year-old mystery in which there are two protagonists, himself and a person from 100 years ago, and a lot of it is breaking codes, which is interesting because that seems to be his specific skill. It's almost like that's kind of the point of the game. Also, an interesting aspect, every single item is being touted as fully interactive, and the puzzles are going to be quote-unquote physics-based. Now, this is a game where that stuff comes with a little bit more hefty of a expectation. This is a very realistic looking game, and physics-based puzzles in a very realistic looking game means they better be good. This one is PC exclusive and will be hitting sometime during the course of the year. We don't know exactly when, but I think it's going to be very interesting at very least. Number 8 is particularly interesting to me. It's called Apsilov, End of Gods, in that it blends science fiction and Nordic mythology, which is something we never, ever see anywhere. And let me just go ahead and say 3 words it contains in the press materials: future Viking horror. Like, that colors me intrigued immediately. I don't even have to think about anything else, but some of the interesting stuff in this is just what it looks like. It picks a green tone, which is not totally abnormal, but the way it uses it is there's a lot of red undertones, which makes it not normal looking in my opinion. And obviously it also takes a lot of Nordic influence, talking about Odin, Nordic gods, and takes place in a sanctuary of steel and concrete, it calls it, where a chaotic entity is using human technology and the power of the Nordic gods to make trouble. You can probably guess what your goal is, but I think this is potentially very interesting. It's coming out in Q3 of this year to PC, so look out for Apsilov, End of Gods. Number 7 is Devotion, a game that is already out, and I just have to just put the stamp of approval on. This game is so different. There is a big reason why this game is number 1 on Steam right now. It just sticks out like a sore thumb, and it's great. And yet, you won't feel alienated by the method of control, the types of angles, but just the story it tells is so different. The title pretty much tells you what you're getting if you have a little context. This game takes place in a 1980s apartment complex in Taiwan that, as you investigate further into the family that has all made vows and pledges towards a religious cause, obviously a cult-like one, you learn about their devotion. And as you do that, the whole place shifts into a hellscape, and it's amazing. But here's something you're going to find different about this game. All of the hellish stuff, the scary, unsettling crap, it's gorgeous, as in, it is stylistically beautiful. This game is so artistic and wonderful, and the story it tells is so non-standard for a video game, and yet it does all of this without traveling into pretentious territory. It never feels that way. It's really a genuinely scary game that I think deserves way more accolades. It came out back in February on the 19th, and it is really amazing. It's out on PC, but I really hope it makes its way to the consoles eventually, because it is really just, a great game. Play it. Now play it. Number 6 is Man of Medan, the first non-exclusive title coming from Supermassive Games in the Dark Pictures anthology, which is more or less a shared universe. They intend to set a lot of different Until Dawn style games, and there are a lot of expectations being placed on Man of Medan. Obviously, Until Dawn is a very good game, and using that method to make a game and basically creating a cinematic universe for it that will span all of the consoles and probably more than one generation of consoles, I'm excited to see where it goes. I honestly think that Until Dawn is a very, very good game, and this, I think, potentially will be like the next big step for Supermassive Games. It's coming to PC, PS4, Xbox One, and it's coming sometime this year. Number 5 is Scorn. Scorn is a game we've talked about a little while. It's interesting. It's a game that I think looks like the aesthetic of Nine Inch Nails in the mid to late 90s, and maybe even the early 2000s a bit, that takes place in a techno-organic structure that is composed of steel, flesh, and bone. That is a direct quote, and from what we've seen, it's accurate. It's a different looking place, something that we really haven't played through, honestly. The idea of the game is a somewhat non-linear look at what the hell is going on. You just kind of wake up there and don't have any idea what's going on. You control a skinless humanoid thing with the intent of solving the mystery of what this is. It will be released in 2 parts, and it looks like they've kind of been taking the mystery approach with the marketing, because this is basically what I've said about the game in the past, and I'm still intrigued by it. I think it's going to be very good, and I think we'll have a lot more to say about it after it comes out. The devs were definitely hit with a long and financially difficult process, and recently said they're very ready to move on to a new chapter. Scorn will be hitting sometime this year on the PC. Number 4 is Days Gone, which is, to be clear, a horde-oriented action game with horror elements. Honestly, some of these sort of, wow, there's too much of this to deal with on an intellectual level, I think is where the horror is going to come from. Feeling overwhelmed by these hordes of zombie things. This one is technically really cool, and I think the story may be interesting as well. It's also apparently quite unforgiving. You get one motorcycle, and you need to keep track of it and how much fuel is in it, and if you run out of fuel, you gotta go get fuel and bring it back. And honestly, that's a good idea. I mean, it depends on how it's executed, and obviously, I probably wouldn't like that in every single game, but Days Gone looks a lot like a few leaps of faith in different directions that I think could very much be good. I'm excited to see exactly how it pans out, and we will on April 26th on the PS4. Number 3 is Layers of Fear 2, the sequel to the game that came out in 2016. That is a psychological horror game that you play as an artist trying to make his masterpiece that actually does layer in the fear. It's a game that was heavily inspired by PT, which would have eventually been Silent Hills, and actually builds an interesting original mythos around itself. Number 2 is The Last of Us Part 2. Now again, this is a game that not a massive amount of details have been put out about, but we know Last of Us pretty well. This is one of the best horror games of the last 20 years, and it's awesome that we are getting a continuation of that story. Obviously, it takes place a little after. We see some people, we see less of the zombies, although they're not really zombies, they're fungus-infected people. But that really may not be the focus of it, we don't know. This whole little colony that we saw in the trailer may not exist by the end of the game. We have no idea yet. And that's what's so intriguing. Anything could happen, but we're seeing kind of a brief moment of human society existing in a lot of the media we've seen in this game, in a world where human society has been decimated. I like that, and I have a feeling it is setting us up for some kind of horrible loss. I also like that. I don't know exactly when Last of Us Part 2 is coming out, and I don't think anybody does, but it is exclusive to the PS4, and we will see it sometime this year. And finally, number 1 is probably the most obvious number 1. It's the Resident Evil 2 remake, which is a shining, glimmering example of what a remake could be. If every remake came out like the Resident Evil 2 remake, no one would be suspicious of remakes. It's such a good version of the story presented in the original Resident Evil 2, and it builds atmosphere in a way that shows the ideas themselves were scary, and that's something that I think a lot of people always thought of the first 3 Resident Evil games as maybe having some kind of mild issue. Is it scary because the controls are very limited? The answer, of course, is no. It's scary because these are brilliant ideas, and I love this game. I love the original version. I think I might like the remake more. It came out on PC, PS4, and Xbox One back in January, and if you haven't played it, you should. It's amazing. Couple of bonus games for you. Someday You'll Return, intended to draw some inspiration from Silent Hill, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and Outlast. That will come out sometime this year to PC, PS4, and Xbox One. Luigi's Mansion 3, which, yeah, I know what you're gonna say. It's a cartoony, silly game that's not supposed to scare you, but let's be honest. If you've played it at night, you've gotten really into it, it's happened. You've jumped. You know. We don't know when that's coming out this year, but it is sometime on Switch. Dying Light 2, which, again, will be elaborating on some of the non-horror elements of the game, but the non-linear, consequence-oriented gameplay is probably going to end up in some horror happening. That's coming to PC, PS4, and Xbox One sometime this year. Metro Exodus, which is already out, and a pretty good game. It does actually do some good stuff as far as not only the horror elements of it, but the open world elements transitioning into linear areas, and gives hope, which is a very weird thing for a game like this to do, but it does. It's a really enjoyable game. It's out on PC, PS4, and Xbox One. And finally, World War Z, which in some respects looks very much like Days Gone in its horde mechanics, but the footage I've watched seems to distinguish it in a few ways, in that it seems a little more linear, but still it seems very interesting and something that I think could also be very good. That's coming to PC, PS4, and Xbox One sometime this year. What horror games are you looking forward to in 2019? Leave us a comment, let us know what you're thinking, and if you like this video, please click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero. We'll see you next time, right here on GameRanks.